Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Dunford, for your distinguished service to our country, and I appreciate your tremendous qualifications for this position, and certainly I give the best to your family as well. I just want to ask a very straightforward question, which is, understandably, many of my constituents, Americans, have grown war-weary. And what I would like you to tell us is, why does the outcome in Afghanistan matter to Americans? And what are the consequences of us if we were to make the decision right now to say we're going to pull out right now? Could you help us with that? And I just want to understand that in terms of, because we have made tremendous sacrifices there of our men and women in uniform.
Senator, thank you for that question. That is the most important question, I think, to the American people, and one we should be able to answer very clearly. In the wake of 9/11, we went to Afghanistan because there was sanctuary for al-Qaeda, and the attacks of 9/11 took place in Afghanistan. That area still is ripe for sanctuary for al-Qaeda. That region is ripe for sanctuary for al-Qaeda. We also wanted to establish a government in Afghanistan and ensure that the Taliban were no longer in a position to harbor al-Qaeda in that part of the region. Those objectives remain. That is, to deny al-Qaeda sanctuary in Afghanistan and deny the ability of the Taliban to overthrow the government in Afghanistan. Now the mission is to ensure that those gains that we have made over the last several years, particularly in the area of development of the Afghan National Security Forces and the gains we'll make as a result of the elections in 2014, providing enduring government, will ensure the Afghans can do what we have been doing over the past decade. I would be concerned at this point that if we didn't complete the mission, and again, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I believe the objectives are attainable. If we didn't complete the mission, we would have an area in Afghanistan where al-Qaeda continue to operate. We would also have a destabilized country on the west side of Pakistan, wherein we have significant national interest as well. So I think it would be bad from the perspective of providing sanctuary from al-Qaeda, and it would have a destabilizing effect on the region with I think, second and third order effects that would be significant and inconsistent with our national interests.
In looking at the conflict in Iraq and thinking about our failure to be able to negotiate a status of forces agreement there, what lessons do you take from that experience in terms of us being able to negotiate a similar agreement in Afghanistan? And in addition to that, what lessons do you also take from Iraq? One of the concerns I have on a secondary but equally important issue is when we look at Iraq, for example, we have a detainee, Doc Duke, who is a Hezbollah leader who was involved in the murder of 5 Americans who the Iraqis are going to let go. So we have individuals, do we not, that are in custody in Afghanistan that may be third-party nationals, others who are too dangerous to release. And I see that as also an issue that needs to be negotiated going forward to make sure that we're not releasing terrorists back out into the open to then harm us and our allies.
Senator, with regard to the first question, in terms of lessons learned, I think one of the critical lessons learned is that we need to allow sufficient time for negotiations to be complete. I'm encouraged that we have internalized that lesson learned as a result of the strategic partnership agreement that was signed in May that set a timeline for having the bilateral security agreement signed within 1 year. Again, that's May of 2013, which is still 6 months ahead of our planned full transition to Afghan control. So I think in that regard we have internalized the lesson learned, and I'm optimistic we have the sufficient time to get that agreement signed, which is so important. I think our negotiations in Iraq perhaps started later than they have started in Afghanistan. The other important lesson that we've learned is that the functions that are currently performed by the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan, and there's some 400 different functions, must eventually be sent out to other organizations where those functions can be performed on an enduring basis. That is, those functions that are enduring. And I know right now that there's a detailed effort ongoing in the International Security Force Assistance Force, as well as back here in Washington in the capitals, to identify those various functions and ensure that over the next 25 months we have a logical, responsible, deliberate way of passing those functions off so that we have continuity as we go into the period of transition post-2014. So I think at the strategic level, those are two of the more important lessons learned, and there's evidence that we have learned those lessons from Iraq's experience. With regard to the individuals of the ilk that you mentioned that need to be detained, I look at that as first and foremost a force protection issue. There are clearly individuals, Al-Qaeda and other members of Haqqani network and some of the more extremists who are absolutely irreconcilable. And from my perspective, those individuals need to remain locked up for the safety and security of our forces as long as we're in Afghanistan, and the safety of the American people and their interests after we come out of Afghanistan.
Are we still, though, facing a challenge with respect to the administration has taken the position that we're not going to add anyone else to Guantanamo Bay, as to making sure that if those individuals remain in custody in a place like Afghanistan, that we could assure that they wouldn't be released? I mean, I think that's one of the challenges we faced in Iraq. Would you agree?
Senator, it was absolutely one of the challenges we face in Iraq, and I know, at least from the periphery, that the administration is now working on the framework within which that issue can be addressed.
I think it has to be. We can't keep releasing people like Dak Duk, who have the blood of Americans on their hands and clearly are the type of individual that's going to go out and continue to engage in terrorist actions. So I think this is an incredibly important issue in terms of protection of the American people and our allies. One other final question. The Wartime Contracting Commission found that $60 billion of U.S. contracting funds had been wasted, misspent, or went in the wrong hands as a result of, in Iraq and Afghanistan. As a result of that, Senator Brown and I had introduced into the Defense Authorization Bill in 2012 provisions to cut through the red tape so that you could cut off contracts sooner if our taxpayer dollars were getting in the wrong hands, or, God forbid, to insurgents, which did happen as well. How are those provisions working? What more can we do there? And could you give us an update on whether that has been helpful to you?
Senator, first, thank you for your assistance in passing that is part of the National Defense Authorization Act last year. And in fact, General Mattis at the United States Central Command, who has that authority, has used that authority a great deal over the past year. In fact, I understand at least $12 million that might have otherwise gone in the hands of the Taliban did not go into the hands of the Taliban because he had the authority to cancel those contracts because of the association of the contractors with the Taliban. I also believe that over the past year, and I did spend quite a bit of time on this on my visit, that they have changed the organizational construct at Central Command, at ISAF, and within the Afghan government to provide, and of course our embassy lead in Afghanistan, to provide better oversight to contracts and ensure that the money that we provide, that the coalition provides, achieves the effect desired in terms of growing the capacity of the Afghans. So I believe that's a good news story. I think that part of the NDAA in 12 has allowed us to be more effective on the battlefield, and I know that both General Allen and General Mattis are very appreciative of having that authority, and they have used it.
Thank you very much, General, and obviously if there's anything more that we can do to give you the authority that you need there to make sure that the money doesn't get into the wrong hands, we would look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.